Let's dance for my Lord. Let's dance.
We know there are many choices in internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
I may not be a millionaire. I may not have a brand new Frigidaire. My clothes ain't all fancy, and my car ain't brand new, but there is joy in my house.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Joy in My House, inspirational reality radio show with a touch of recovery. A reality radio show where nothing is left unsaid.
And nothing is insignificant. Who says it? See, I'm almost there.
I'm joined here with my guest co-host today, Van Eric. He's also my producer. Welcome back to the show. Welcome to another day.
Thank you.
Joy
And,
in My House.
and that was a good one. You can see if I'm paying attention to your show, and I do.
I want to thank all our listeners and viewers out there for being a part of the show, part of the joy that we have in our show here. If you are just watching us, I want you to know that you can watch us and stream us live on any mobile device on ustream.tv/LA Talk Live Radio. I want you to find us on Facebook /Joy in My House and like the page and receive up-to-date lineups of guests and information. We had a great show for you last week. With a special in-studio guest by the name of Pastor Leanne Pendergrass. She is the minister director of My Gathering Place, and she is a host of Uniting the Nations on the Cross TV network. Now, if you're just listening to us today and want to catch any of our archive shows, I want you to know that you can find all of our past episodes here on www.latalklive.com. Just click on shows, click on Joy in My House, and you can pass all of our archive episodes. We have a great show for you today. We have our in-studio teaser for today is Crystal Olson. She is editor-in-chief for Street Gospel Magazine and founder of Classy Ladies Ministry. She's going to be giving her testimony today, and it's going to be very insightful for you out there who are listening and viewing. And I want you to find out more information on her ministry, which is the Classy Lady Ministry .org. We're going to be right back. This is Joy in My House, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to stay tuned.
Joy in my house, I've got joy in my house, there is joy in my house, there is joy in my house, joy in my house, I've got joy in my house, there is. My clothes ain't all fancy, and my car ain't brand new, but there is joy in my house.
Hello, I'm Joel Ramirez
And I'm Lolita Robinson-Coppage, and welcome to Joy in My House
on LATalkLive.com. Inspirational radio,
with a touch of recovery.
a reality show where nothing is left unsaid,
And no one is insignificant who says it.
exclusively on LATalkLive.com. You can also catch us on iTunes Radio R&B or watch us on Ustream TV.
Reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is LA Talk Live, and we are more than just talk.
Hi, I'm Ro Williams, and I would like to invite you to join GospelRhythms.com live every Sunday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for our new show, Gospel Rhythms Talk Live. Join us as we celebrate, promote, and elevate Christians in entertainment. So don't forget to tune in to Gospel Rhythms Talk Live exclusively on LATalkLive.com. You can also catch us on iTunes Radio under R&B or watch us on Ustream.tv. Reality radio handcrafted for your listening pleasure. This is Gospel Rhythms on LA Talk Live, where we don't just talk about it, we are about it.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Joy in My House, inspirational reality radio show with a touch of recovery. I have my in-studio guest, Crystal Olson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Crystal, I always like to let our audience and viewers who are listening and viewing know how we met, because this is kind of interesting for me. It's rare that I just take on a guest to come onto the show without really doing my research or my background or not knowing them through a personal friend. I saw you on Facebook. You were one of my suggested friends, but we didn't have any mutual friends. And I saw on the bottom of your name that you were part of a ministry called Classy Ladies Ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So I gravitated towards that right away. I clicked on you and I saw about you, and it had a ministry called Classy Lady Ministry. I ended up reading a little bit of the mission statement, and I thought you were so appropriate for the show. And I called you, and you were very willing to come on my show.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, do you get this a lot? Do you get people calling you to come on their shows?
Actually,
or do radio?
The ministry just launched about 3 months ago. And so I did have one interview, a phone interview already, but it was with someone who was kind of inexperienced with interviewing. So that one didn't go so well. Actually, the day that I had that interview, I was contacted by you. And then I was also invited by a radio station, Launch Radio in Orlando, Florida, to have a phone interview with them on October 8th. So
wow,
that was,
interesting.
and then I was invited to speak at a conference in Orlando, Florida next year, but I don't think, I don't feel led to do that. There was something that I saw about that person's ministry that didn't quite sit well with me, and I feel like it is important to
have discernment,
the integrity of your ministry is very, very important.
I agree.
And so, right.
Well, I want to say congratulations for the ministry doing so well in such a short period of time, but it just goes to show the work that God can do when you truly submit to His will.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I'm seeing. It's been phenomenal.
Well, let's get into it. If you're just joining us, I'm joined here by our in-studio guest, Crystal Olson. She is the founder of the Classy Lady Ministry,
Mm-hmm.
which just launched about 3 months ago. But you're also the chief, the editor-in-chief for Street Gospel Magazine. Tell us a little bit about that.
That is a magazine that the second issue is going to be coming out about the end of this month or maybe early October, and that's the issue that I got to edit. And it is a ministry that basically he gives a voice to people who wouldn't otherwise have a voice. It's not focusing on the well-known people,
Right.
out in the world. It's testimonies from people from all walks of life. This second issue is on human trafficking, and
Wow.
he covered every aspect from an ex-pimp to prostitutes to paid high-end escorts and strippers, and there's Zoe's children's home, and I think they're in Santa Clarita, but they have a children's home. I think it's in Thailand. It's somewhere overseas, but they're opening one in LA. And so it's, and that's for children who have been sex trafficked. And so.
Well, how interesting that God has really given you a very difficult and challenging life, and we're going to get to that right now in your testimony, but now is blessing you with such amazing opportunity to share the work that He's done in your life.
Yes, and that's, everything has been happening very quickly. Later on, I'll kind of get to how I even came to California because I am fairly new here, but since I've been here and gotten into my house in February, I mean, just so many things have been falling into place, and everything it's going very, very well.
Well, let's get into that. Ladies and gentlemen, Crystal Olson was founded. I found you on Facebook, and you were willing to come on and share your testimony. Now, her testimony, ladies and gentlemen, it's a little deep, and it's a little difficult. So I want to thank you, first of all, for coming on and being as transparent as you're going to be, sharing some of the amazing things that happened, but also some of the tragic things that has happened.
Right.
Now, where did you grow up?
Gosh, I grew up in a very small, actually it's outside of a small town called Deer Park, Washington. We lived out in the country on a small farm. The town was, I think the population was 2,000, predominantly white. So I was one of the very few people who had color to my skin, and I grew up absolutely hating it. I wished I was white, and I was ashamed of my skin color. It was a very sheltered, strict life. When you live out in the country, outside of a tiny little town, you're not exposed to the real world. And So that's where I grew up.
Well, were you a church-going family?
We went to church occasionally. It was kind of, we would go to church for a while and then we wouldn't, but it was one of those things where you go to church, but you're just going to church. As far as our home life at home, it definitely was not like a family how it should be. It was a really like oppressive home, a demonically oppressed home.
Wow.
It really was.
Now, did you have any siblings?
I have a brother, a full brother. His name is Joe. I have a half sister. Her name is Audrey. She's from my dad's second wife. And then I have, my parents both, my dad married 2 women after my mom. And my mom left when I was 4 years old. I was 4. And my dad would not let her take us. So we were there with him. He married a woman. She was pregnant with my half-sister, and that was an extremely crazy, chaotic relationship. It was insane. A lot of fighting.
Well, let's touch on that. What dysfunction did you witness in your home?
Oh, my goodness. I think I was about 5. I was 4, maybe 5 years old when he married her, and I just remember we had to stay with different family members a lot. We stayed with my grandmother. We stayed with my aunt, or I stayed with my Aunt Karen. We were like bounced around a lot. And at one point we ended up in a foster home because she took us to Seattle. Like she called the police and told the police that my dad had guns hidden in the barn, which he didn't. And so the police, I just remember being in the car at the end of the driveway. That's where she had me and my brother and her 3 kids. And she had us locked in the car, and the police are crawling all over the property and looking for my dad. And she took off with us that night to Seattle. I don't know how we ended up in a foster home, but we did. Then from there, I believe my Aunt Becky got us from there. And thank God that relationship did not last very long.
So a lot of dysfunction.
Right.
And it must have caused you a lot of fear and insecurity because
it really did.
There is no foundation.
It did. I mean, I saw them fighting all the time, and he would lock her out of the house, and she would be outside crying and smoking, cigarettes. And I remember her on top of me on the bottom bunk of the bed. She bit the right side of my wrist. And she told me, she said, if you tell your dad, I will beat you. And I don't know why she did it. I don't remember anything leading up to it. I just remember her being on top of me. And my dad saw the bite marks on my wrist, and so they got into a big, huge fight over that. But
what other dysfunction did you experience any more dysfunction in that family?
Yeah, I mean, after she left, my dad immediately married this other woman who had 3 daughters, and that kind of makes up the bulk of my childhood. And I think that part actually affected me and my life as an adult. It really affected it negatively. The woman that he married, she didn't really seem too thrilled, I guess, to be me and my brother, I felt like we were like outsiders in our own home. Like she came in with her 3 daughters and kind of took over the house and wasn't too happy about my brother and I being there. And it was just a very, very
But how old were
cold.
you?
I was in kindergarten. So it was like immediate. As soon as, my mom leaves and then he marries this one woman, that's crazy, insane, very like chaotic.
very
And then
volatile.
immediately after it was very. And then immediately after she leaves, he marries this other woman. And so this other woman comes in with her 3 daughters and, they settle into the house. And it was just such the best way I can describe growing up. She was married to my dad up until his death, which is something I'll get into later. But I was 19 when he died. So, it was just a very cold and lonely existence. It definitely, we did not feel wanted in that house.
Right. You didn't feel safe. You didn't feel wanted. There's no love. So
No, absolutely no love. We grew up without a mom. We got to go visit our mom during like summer vacation and Christmas vacation. And that was when, she was always very affectionate with us and showered us with love. And she was really, really good to us. And that was pretty much the only time we ever were shown affection other than when we visited her parents, my grandparents. And I absolutely adore them. They're like wonderful people. And so those are the only times that we were ever shown affection and love.
And during this time, how was your walk in faith? Did you believe in a God?
Yeah,
Did
we
you-
grew up. I mean, my dad's, see, and this is another aspect that's kind of interesting, is both of my parents were adopted, and both of my parents are Native American, but they were adopted by white families. And so that's a struggle that I've always had myself, is not being able to grow up knowing my culture and knowing who my biological family is, and really just not, like, for some reason, and I don't really know why. I mean, my mom's adopted family is completely different than my dad's adopted family. And my dad's adopted family they're very, very strict Christians, very, very old fashioned. And we never felt like we belonged in that family. We always felt like black sheep of that family. Still unfortunately do feel that way. I just don't, it's just, I don't feel like that I'm a part of that family. But on the other, we did, because of my grandmother, you know, she was very, you know, very, very church going woman, very, like, she really was, you know, she was a good Christian woman. And so are my aunts and my uncles. So I think that they really did play a large part in, like, laying that foundation down.
That's right.
They did. And, you know, it really wasn't so much my dad and my stepmom. It was my dad's side of the family, I think.
Well, we always talk about that because there's always people that got places in our lives and we don't realize it until we look back, how they put certain people in our lives to just kind of introduce us, to put the seed in there. It's our job to water the seed, so on and so forth. But you had a foundation of who God was. But during your teen years, things got a little more complicated, as it does for most teenagers. Because at 14, I believe, you drank for the first time and you lost your virginity that day.
Right. My dad finally let me go live with my mom. That was the only thing I ever wanted my whole life, was to go live with my mom. And he finally let me go live with her. And her boyfriend at the time, who is now my stepdad, they've been married for quite a number of years. So at 14, I moved from this little farm, you know, to a suburb of Seattle. We lived in Bellevue, and that was a huge, I mean, because I had lived such a sheltered life, and I'm not saying that it affects everybody the same, but for me personally, going from one extreme to another extreme, I mean, I remember being able, like, walking up to the grocery store, and what a great experience and freedom that was, just to be able to walk up to a store. And so I pretty much went buck wild. Like, I really did. And because I didn't really quite know how to handle, like, this freedom and the exposure to different people I had never been exposed to, and different things. And so I did start, I drank alcohol for the first time when I was 14. And when I did, I think I drank 4 beers, and I was, like, really, I mean, I got
Well,
drunk.
14, yeah, your alcohol tolerance isn't very high.
Right. And when it's your first time drinking. And so, yeah, and that's when I lost my virginity, was at age 14. And, you know, I had started smoking cigarettes. I was sneaking out all the time, and I would be out all night long, and then come back home, like, right before school starts, get ready for school, and then go to school. And so, yeah, I was skipping school. So I definitely was not, you know, following rules.
Well, like you said, it's a culture shock, especially at that age. The teen years is already sensitive as it is. Then to go into another completely different environment, to assimilate, is very difficult, especially not having laid down a foundation for you to have structure, to have rules, you know, coming from your father's side, where there's a little bit of dysfunction, and then coming over here.
It was a lot of dysfunction. And I think my mom, I mean, she is a wonderful mom now, but back then she did not know how to be a mom. She was more my friend. And so I pretty much ran all over her. You know, she wasn't strict with me. And so, you know, she didn't know how to be a mom, because she didn't raise any kids. So.
And after that experience, you continued drinking regularly until the age of 25.
Yeah, I got pregnant with my first child when I was 15 years old, and my mom came into my bedroom shortly after and said, I am going to send you to an unwed mother's home. And I said, no, you are not. And I packed a bag and I walked out the door, and I never went back. I had actually met somebody at a football game. It was one of my friend's uncles, and he said that he was 20. I think he said he was 24, which, of course, when you're 15 years old, that's still way too old. You have no business being with a little teenager.
Right.
But he had told me at that game, he said, if you ever need any place to stay, you can come stay with me. So when my mom told me that, that's what popped in my head.
Right.
Okay, I know where I'm going. So I walked out the door and I walked to their apartment, and that's where I stayed. I ended up being in a relationship with him. You know, I was about 8 weeks pregnant when I went to go stay with him, and I lived with him until my daughter was 10 months old. And I found out about 4 months into it that he was actually 32. He was a crack addict. I was just, it was a crazy, very, very, another chaotic time in my life. The police were called so many times during, you know, after I had my oldest child. He started hitting me, and he would pick me up by my neck, and like, it was bad. And so the police had been called so many times that they contacted CPS, and basically I was given 24 hours for, you know, to find a place for my daughter to stay, a safe place, until I could get into a stable living environment. And so she stayed with my mom for about a month, and the CPS worker actually worked to get me into a teen parent home in Seattle. He got me into that home, and he picked me up, and we went over and picked up my daughter from my mom's, and he drove us to Seattle. And so, you know, I had a good experience, actually. They don't just take your kids away. They actually do try to keep your family together, and that's what he did.
Well, that's good to say, because I think sometimes people are very fearful of what's going to happen. But in your case, it worked positive.
They helped me.
They helped you, even though your daughter had to be removed for a bit of a time, but then it was brought back to you and put in a better situation for you and your daughter.
Right.
Yeah, can I say something on that? Because I had that experience. Because, Children's Services will try to help the biological parents. That rumor that they won't is not fully true, because I had full custody of my daughter. They awarded me for full custody of my daughter, and I didn't think they was, because I'm a male and she's a female.
Right.
But to have that opportunity, so I understand what you're saying.
That's awesome.
And I think it's important that, you know, that people that have children realize that it's their children, it's their responsibility, not the grandparents. You know, we tend to right away run to the grandparents and say, "Oh, you take care of it."
I've never, ever done that. No, I am raising my kids, and me only I.
And then hopefully your children learn that foundation, and when they have their children, like my 16-year-old right now is pregnant, and she has to realize that she's going to raise that kid. I will be there to help her as much as I can, but at the end of the day,
that's your responsibility.
That's her responsibility. And if she has to sign up for welfare or that nature, not that I believe she needs to, but it might be an experience that she has to go through for her to grow.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
not to cut you off, but because my sister's daughter is pregnant, and she's a teen, like maybe 20, maybe 19, 20, and she's having twins out the door. So out the door, she got two mouths to feed out the door. So and she's still a young child herself. So I had my daughter call her to give her some type of advice as far as how she's able to be a consistent parent with just one.
That's so important.
Yeah.
And you know what I want to say is tough love, and that's what when you really hold your kids accountable. And, for their actions, that is something that my mom always did, and I didn't appreciate it at the time, but she showed me a tough love. And she never bailed me out of anything, and I used to actually have a lot of anger and resentment towards her because of that, because if I needed to borrow like $4, no, I don't have it, sorry. And like when I would get into these really bad situations, the majority of the time my mom would not bail me out. So I learned to figure everything out on my own and become very, very independent, to where I don't ask people for help. I get it figured out on my own, and I really believe I give credit to my mom for that, just because she kind of forced me.
Well, that's interesting, because my parents were the opposite. I'd go to jail, tell my girl I was with or whatever situation, call my dad. My dad would have a cashier's check that second. He had money in the bank to bail me out, and he enabled me quite a bit, but he was always talking to me. He was always preaching to me, and I'd be like, "Dad, I don't want to hear it. I just got out of being locked up, like I don't need to hear it." But he'd sit me in that car and talk to me for hours. He's a professor, so he can talk for hours. And I remember telling him one time, "Dad, I don't want to hear it." He's like, "Do you want me to shut up? I'll shut up, and I'll never tell you anything again. But know that that's a day that I don't care anymore." And then I told him, "No, well, I don't ever want you to stop caring," because he was bailing me out. Eventually, I started maturing and started learning that I needed I needed to listen to the advice he was giving me. But I think I got a lot of enabling, and I didn't want to do that for my daughter. And my mom constantly tells me not to do that for her.
Exactly.
Because she's like, look what happened to you. We enabled you, and you went on this crazy path because you always knew we'd bail you out.
Exactly. And that's something I have 7 kids, and that's something I have always felt strongly about. If you get yourself into a situation or you go to jail, guess what? You're going to sit there. I am not going to bail you out. I show my kids I'm very firm with them. I don't know. I guess, I don't know. I don't know if I would say I'm strict with them, but I think that the way I have parented them really reflects a lot in their behavior, because everywhere I go, and I've been hearing it for years, like strangers are always telling me, like, your kids are so well behaved, like they're so respectful and they behave so well, like, and so
because it's a reflection of the parent.
it is to a degree, because people used to tell me that about my oldest daughter back when I was acting crazy, and so I would tell them, no, that's just how she is. She's a good child, because I most definitely was not a great mother back then. So
And see, that's all because of your consistency. Because when you say no, you stay with no.
Yeah,
Right.
it means
You're
no.
not confusing your children by saying no,
Being
no,
weak.
and then say yes.
Right.
And when you say yes, you say yes. You continue saying yes. You don't say yes, you can do something, and then 2 minutes later, no.
Right.
It shows that structure and consistency.
Exactly.
Right?
And as long as you're consistent with that, by being consistent like that, and allows your children to be disciplined.
They thrive off of that. Kids
Exactly.
really do
Well,
thrive off
they look
of
for structure.
Yes.
They look for structure to feel safe, to have
Right.
that security. But I wanted to get back to your testimony, because it starts getting a little deeper, because the drinking progressed. You would often wake up with men you had just met in their beds, and this continued for a while. But you also were a victim of rape.
Yeah,
Somebody
after
put some.
when I went to the teen parent home, that is honestly one of the worst places. I felt like I was in prison. It was I ran away after about, I would say, a month and a half to 2 months of staying there. I left. And the lady who was on staff that night, she told me, she says, by law, we are required to call the police and report you as a runaway. But if you're going to leave, like, go, And so she gave me a chance to leave. And I ended up going and staying with this guy that I had just met. And he lived in SeaTac across from the airport. And one night we went to the airport to go pick up his brothers who were visiting from Chicago. And so we were sitting in the living room, and they had a bottle of Hennessy, and they gave me, and I used to be able to drink. My gosh, like I would drink a lot. And they gave me about this much Hennessy in a small little glass. And the next thing I remember is waking up on the floor of the apartment in the living room, and it's sunlight, and these guys are all standing around me. I'm naked, but I'm covered with a sheet. And they're all saying, wake up, we ran a train on you last night. And I'm just like, wow. And so they had a barbecue that day, and I stayed in the bedroom the whole time, because I was just like, oh my gosh, like what happened?
What just happened?
What am I going to do? And I ended up leaving that night. But yeah, it was.
Well, I want to thank you for your transparency. Like I said, it's not easy to come and to divulge some of our really deep hurts and hang-ups. But I know that you believe that this might help somebody out there who's listening and viewing, who might have similar situations that, when things like that happen, it takes your innocence and it really ruptures you emotionally, that it causes you fear, which causes you not to act. So if somebody's out there who's listening and viewing is maybe going through the same thing, what advice would you have for them? What would you tell them that maybe something happened to them or is on the road to this destruction, this self-destruction?
My goodness. Well, for one, if somebody rapes you, I know for me personally, I was ashamed and I didn't want to go through the process of, reporting that, but I would encourage anybody who does go through that to report it. So that the people who have done it to you are held accountable. And as far as going down the path of destruction, that I went down, most definitely it is absolutely not worth it. I was so hard-headed. It did not matter what my mom or anybody said or did. I was going to do what I wanted to do, and it's absolutely not worth it. Finally, for the first time in my life, just not even that long ago, I really am actually living within God's will, and things are finally going right in my life. And had I done that earlier on in my life, I could have avoided so much turmoil, so many problems, so many horrible situations, so much hurt, everything, had I simply followed the rules,
Right.
simple rules, and really gave myself to God early on. My life would have been so much easier,
Because things continue to get worse at this point, because at the age of 19, your father committed suicide.
Yeah, my dad, I was living in my own, I was actually living in my second apartment. I had got my first apartment when I was 17 years old, and by this time I had 2 kids. And so I got a phone call from my brother, and he said, Dad shot himself. And I said, what do you mean? I thought my dad, because my dad was a hunter, a fisherman. He was an avid outdoorsman. He could survive off the land. I thought my dad accidentally shot himself in the toe. And he goes, Dad's dead. And I was like, oh my God. And it was just crazy, because my dad was the strongest person that I had ever known. And I didn't know that he had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder until after he killed himself. My stepmom told me that he had been talking about killing himself for 5 years, and he did it exactly the way he said he was going to. And he used a .30-06 and shot himself in the head. And my brother, even though people tried to talk him out of it, my brother went to our house that we grew up in. My dad did it in his bedroom, and he gutted the whole bedroom. Everything that there was head matter on, my brother, he ripped up the carpet, took out the bed, all the clothing, everything, took it outside and burned it. So when I came from Seattle, to the other side of the state where we grew up, we went to the house that I grew up in, and I went to my dad's bedroom, and I saw blood splattered on the walls and the ceiling, and pieces of his head everywhere. And I gagged, and then I gagged again and went running to the back bathroom. But the smell that was in that house, I'd never smelled death before, that sickening sweet smell. And that smell stayed with me. It was crazy, because even after I went back to my brother's house for the next 2 weeks, that smell, even if I was outside, would randomly get so strong in my nose I would smell it. And so, yeah, that was a very difficult thing to deal with, because he didn't leave a note. And I mean, there was an argument with my oldest stepsister that led up to him doing that. But he obviously, like I said, I didn't know he had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but it makes sense now, because growing up, he wasn't around very much because he worked so much. But when he was around, we walked on eggshells.
Right.
He was scary. I was scared of my dad. We were scared to look wrong, say anything wrong. I mean, do anything. So we were like little soldiers when he was around, concentrating on keeping our faces straight so that he wouldn't explode. And
you experienced some dysfunction with him as well.
I did not have a good relation. I didn't have a relationship with my dad, actually. My brother did. And I was always told that the reason why he treated me the way he treated me was because I reminded him of my mom, because I looked just like my mom. He was protective of my brother. And yeah, he was. My stepmom, the one that he was married to, at the time of his death, that we spent the majority of our childhood with, for some reason, they used to argue about my brother a lot, and my dad would be very protective of my brother. But again, he was not in the home a lot.
Right.
And when he was, we never knew what would set him off. And his form of discipline would definitely fit within the guidelines of child abuse. I mean, he would his spanking, it would just go on forever, and we would get numb, and he would just go into this rage where his voice was different, his eyes were different. I know my dad was possessed. I know he was. And it's like he would black out, and he would lose all control. And my stepmom and stepsisters would be screaming and crying for him to stop, and he wouldn't stop. And then he would throw us on the ground and tell us to shut up when he was done. And it was scary.
Well, I wanted to talk about this situation, or this time where God actually spoke to you. People talk about him speaking audibly, and you had that experience, and it was very profound for you. Tell me what that was like, because you were pregnant at the time.
Pregnant with my 7th child. She's 5 now, but when I was pregnant with her, I had really started taking my relationship with God and trying to take it seriously with him in 2011. The one thing I had not been able to conquer was not having sex, being abstinent. That was my biggest struggle. And so I made up my mind to try, and I did for 19 months. I think, it was that was after I had her. But before I chose to do that, I had my 7th child in 2009, and I felt so guilty for getting pregnant that I would lay in bed and, pregnant outside of marriage, out of wedlock. And so I would lay in bed and cry really hard every night and ask God to forgive me. And I would just be laying there crying, like begging him, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I thought I was being punished. I thought he was punishing me by allowing me to get pregnant. And one night as I was laying there crying, this strong, firm voice breaks into my thoughts and said, if I wanted to punish you, I would have given you death, not life. And I knew what he was talking about. He was talking about AIDS, HIV, because that had always been my greatest fear, was catching HIV. And so from that day forward, that self-condemnation, it lifted off of me, and, I knew he wasn't punishing me.
Well, I want to talk about that because at that point you began to realize that your home was unsuitable or a safe environment for your children. During this time, you met a man that you would regularly see.
That was actually that was when, let me see, I had my youngest child. She's only 5 years old, but well before that, when I was about 24, 25 years old, I'm almost 37 now. So back in my 20s, I actually, there was a man who came to my house, and it was somebody that I used to sleep with when I was drunk. And he came to my house one night when I was sober, and we were outside on the porch talking. I remember it was raining, and he said, Crystal, he says, I'm really worried about you. He says, you are too beautiful to be doing what you're doing. And he goes, I'm afraid you're going to catch HIV or AIDS. Wow. And when he said that to me, oh my gosh, that blew me away, because I really realized, like, on the outside, people are viewing me as like a hoe. And that was embarrassing. And I was really ashamed, that I was being viewed like that.
You talked about that in your testimony, how you felt that shame and guilt. But having decided that night to change your life at 24, what did you do?
When he said what he said to me, I made up my mind that night. I was no longer going to drink, because when I drank, that's when I would black out, and I would sleep with men that I would never, I am a shy person. I would never sleep with men. I would sleep with men that I would never sleep with sober, and do things that I would never do. And so when he told me that, I made up my mind, I'm going to eliminate what is causing me to behave this way. And my drinking, I drank every other day. And the only reason I didn't drink every single day is because I would have such a horrible hangover that I would have to recover from that hangover. So then I could drink the next day. And my addiction to alcohol was not physical, it was mental. And I just believed that I had to drink to have a good time, and I needed to drink to relax and, act, I guess,
be
in
social,
the way. Yeah, be social. And
like Zac Efron says, is social lubricant.
Right.
They feel that they're so insecure with their own selves that, they have to do these external things to numb themselves, to think that they can behave normally.
Right. And I mean, my home was so chaotic when I drank there. I wasn't a club person, so people came over to my house. There was people over at my house all the time, drinking, rowdy, being loud. Wow. I mean, like fighting, like at one time, my one of my kids' fathers, we were together off and on for 8 years, and he actually punched me when we were drunk one night, and his ring put a hole in my nose right here, all the way down to the bone, and he broke my nose. But I didn't want to get him in trouble, so I didn't even go to the hospital until the next afternoon. And then I lied to the staff and said, well, I got in a car accident and hit my nose. That's not a believable lie, but they didn't question me. So yeah, I mean, it was crazy. The home and I didn't realize it at the time until I stopped drinking, how chaotic and dysfunctional and unstable my home was for my kids. Like, when I think back now, I feel so bad, because, they would be trying to sleep so they could get up for school the next morning. Right. And there's all these loud people, loud music all night long.
Well, I wanted to ask, because, we talk a lot about here on recovery and staying sober. What was your technique, or what did you do to get off alcohol?
It was my mind. I had gotten a couple DUIs, and I had to go mandatory alcohol classes. No, those did not. And I'm not downplaying the effectiveness, because I know that a lot of people, those classes, the 12-step program, they have helped people. But like I said, my addiction was not physical. It was mental. And so once I made up my mind to change, I did it. I didn't, I had been gone through those classes before, but I didn't want to change at that time, so I didn't.
Right. You have to be willing.
Right.
You have to be willing. Well, let's talk about now, fast forwarding a little bit. After a failed marriage at 29, you began to seek Christ, and this is your early walk with Christ. Tell me what got you to the point where you really started searching for God or searching for Jesus.
It kind of started when I was still in my first marriage. It started then. After that whole ordeal, that was, people say that's like it sounds like a Lifetime movie. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that, but it was very, very scary, and I am actually still dealing with things from that marriage. It was during towards the end of that marriage is when I started seeking Christ, and after when we separated, I kind of went wild again for 2 weeks. And I started drinking again, and I was sleeping around, and then I said, wait a minute, I need to get myself together, because I had gotten married, I think I was 25. And so then after that, I kind of I've got freedom now, and I'm going to have fun for a little bit, but it only lasted for about 2 weeks. And I said, wait a minute, you need to get yourself together. You cannot revert back to your old ways. And it was during that time that I got pregnant with my 6th child. And my 5th child was with my first husband. I had 4 kids when we met. And so I got pregnant with my 6th child. And again, it's my walk for years was, from then until I'd say 2011, it was like taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And my greatest struggle has always been sexual temptation. It's always been men, because growing up the way that I grew up and not feeling loved and accepted and constantly seeking that acceptance from people, it really did affect me throughout my life, where the attention that I would get from men, I thrived off of that. And so I think I had an addiction to, that attention
I
from
agree,
men.
because I'm also in program, and I identify as a relationship addict. The validation of a girl wanting to be with me or sleeping with me gave me that importance. It was only till I really submitted to Christ and filled that hole or that void with His love, with His grace, have I been able to abstain. Because myself too, I was sexually sober for about 2.5 years, met a beautiful woman, had a relationship with her for about 3.5 years. Even though it was volatile, I was only with her, and after that I've been alone again. We broke up. I haven't been with anybody. It's close to a year now. And I thought the same. I have to go out there and start dating again, or start being in relationships. Maybe not all the way and sleep with them, but get myself out there. But I come to find out that if I rely on Christ's love, on His grace, that sustains me. Now, obviously, I think He has a partner for me. He has a woman for me, a wife. It's just not time right now. So right now I have to sustain in His love, which sometimes gets a little lonely, a little difficult. But He puts people in my life. My children get to come and spend some real quality time with me. The relationships I have with other Christian men that mentor me. And, having relationships with my guests now that are amazing, that give me hope and inspire me that, God is working on somebody just like God is working on me for me to come together.
And that's right, because right now it helps you get in touch with who you are.
Exactly.
And that's where we get lost at, because we forget who we are. And because I'm seeing somebody, but I live with 2 other people, and that's me, myself, and I. When I go home from this station, and I go home, there's nobody there. So I have to really, get used to being with myself, by myself.
Yeah.
And like I explained to Crystal before you came in, I take myself out. I went to that movie theater I was telling you, and I allowed them to pamper me, and there's nothing wrong with with that. So yeah, I commend on both of y'all doing
when
that.
You can be comfortable with yourself and being single, I mean, that is really a great, wonderful thing, because you're not depending. You're not dependent on anybody or anything.
When that's the codependency in us, that we think that if somebody else is happy with us, then we're happy. But a lot of times,
that validation from other people, and really we do not need that validation, and that's something I have come to realize, and it's actually so freeing.
It really is, yes.
Exactly.
Amen.
There's so much freedom in that.
Just like I'm looking at you right now with your nails. See how you got your nails did? Don't that make you feel good when you go get your nails did?
It does.
See what I'm saying? There you go. You know what I mean? You don't need nobody to say, well,
Exactly.
you need to get your nails done.
I get them done for me.
You get them done for
Exactly.
you.
And
You
I
know
think
what
that's so important to come to a place in a relationship with yourself that you're comfortable with yourself. You're comfortable in your own skin.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, without needing that social lubricant of alcohol, of acting out, of whatever. Because it is a struggle. And it is something that's a difficult thing. But you saying as you abstain more and more, got in touch with yourself more and more, got in touch with God more and more, you were more and more comfortable with yourself. Which
Absolutely. And, a lot of that has actually only just occurred even just in the past, I would say, like 6 to 8 months.
Wow.
Like
Wow.
a lot. I mean, even just in the past 3 months, I have changed so much as far as my way of thinking, viewing the world and people differently. It's like I'm seeing things so differently than how I ever did before.
Well, I wanted to touch on something because after that, you try to do things the right way. In 2003, you met a pastor online.
Oh, that was actually 2013, just last year.
2013. I said 2003. I'm sorry. And, you were trying to do the right thing. So you had a long distance relationship. You guys would fly out back and forth to see one another. But you got married.
Mm-hmm.
You went and got married. You did it right. But the marriage turned.
Yeah, I was really fooled. I was naive to that pastor title, and I really did believe that he was a true man of God. And when I look back now, there's signs. I was crying on a regular basis when I was not crying before he came into my life. And so when the kids, we got married August 28th of last year, the kids and I, actually all 7 of my kids, we all moved down to California November 16th of last year. 3 weeks after getting down here to California, we ended up in a domestic violence shelter.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he was extremely, extremely controlling. He was trying to brainwash my kids and turn them against me. He would follow me through the house yelling, and he's 6'6", I believe.
Wow.
Very much athletic build, and he was intimidating. He used intimidation to rule that household. I mean, I saw the way that he dealt with his 12-year-old daughter, and I started crying one time. I'm like, because I knew how that felt as a child,
Right.
to have your dad towering over you, yelling at you, and then he would slam his hand on the door next to her, and the poor girl would jump out of her skin. And I mean, one time he picked up his 100-pound dog and threw the dog in the bedroom. So it was tactics like that he used to intimidate, like, I rule this household, and you all
Right.
better not step out of line. And so he got absolutely irate one time because, when he would come home from work, I had to have dinner made and serve him, and I had to be in the bedroom with him the whole time. I was not allowed to go anywhere. If I did ever want to go anywhere, even when he was at work, I needed to get permission from him. He was so controlling that I wasn't even allowed to open up the door of the car to let the kids get in the car in the garage. His rule was you pull it out and then the kids get in. Well, I thought it was okay one time to open up the door myself because I'm an adult. I know I'm not going to ding the door
Right.
and hit it. But my gosh, he absolutely went off, irate. And he would accuse me of having a Jezebel spirit if I did anything that was against what he said. So he would tell me that I have a Jezebel spirit, that I'm trying to ruin his ministry, that I'm trying to ruin him. He told me that I was like the devil, and he would say all this in front of the kids, and he would do it methodically. That's how I knew he was trying to brainwash
Right.
them.
He was manipulating.
Right. And he said, you are filthy inside. You are like the devil. Get out of my house right now. He goes, you are the biggest narc I've ever known in my life, because I had asked a pastor counselor who had just started marriage counseling with us. We had our first session with him. And I had asked that pastor for help in addressing the issues of the house. His house was absolutely filthy. Our basic needs were not being met in that house. There was no dishes there. It was horrible conditions. It was absolutely filthy, trash outside on the side of the house, dog hair everywhere. I mean, it was grimy, disgusting. I didn't even have supplies to clean the house. And I asked this counselor for help in addressing the issue of the house. And I sent the counselor pictures so that he would see, I'm not exaggerating, this really
Right.
is a serious issue. And he absolutely, he kicked me out of the house. And so that's when we went to the shelter. We stayed there from December 6th to December 15th, and it's House of Ruth in Pomona, and they are a phenomenal shelter.
Wow.
And they took really good care of us. But I left because one of my kids was back up in Washington visiting her father, and there's a parenting plan, and he has been trying to get custody of her for 7 years and takes me to court at least once a year, full with lies. Alleging horrible abuse in my house and everything. And the staff told me, they said, if he finds out that she's here with you, that you guys are staying here and what happened,
You can lose
he
custody.
can get custody of her. And I knew if he got any wind of it, that's exactly what he would do. So I left and I went back to my husband's house. Well, that only lasted for 10 days. I ended up having to call the police on him on December 31st because he had shoved the closet door into me, and I had to, like, I almost fell down, and he was pushing his body into me and yelling over me, and I told him, I said, stop. I said, if you don't stop, I'm going to call the police. I was really scared. And he didn't stop, and I remember my hands shaking. I reached up to get my phone, and I called 911, and they came. He ended up leaving, but he ended up having the electricity turned off in the house 8 days later to force us out. And, you know, I had lived in my last house in Washington for 7 years. We left absolutely everything. We came down here to California with only the clothes that we could fit for like 4 people in the trunk of my car. And that's all we had. And so when he did what he did, I'm just like, wow, like this is a pastor. He's supposed to be a man of God. And he's forcing his wife and 6 kids. My oldest had gone back up to Washington to live. So wife and 6 kids out on the streets. He knew that we didn't know anybody. We had nowhere to go. And that's what he did. And so thank God, a couple that were acquaintances of him and his ex-wife, I contacted one of them on Instagram to see if they could take care of our little Shih Tzu while we tried to get into a shelter. And they ended up letting me and 6 kids live in their house for a whole month until we got into our
Well,
place.
I want to talk about that when we come back. God not leaving you and giving you a heart for ministry. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joy in My House. I want you guys to stay tuned. We're going to be right back.
My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. Dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name, who Christ the solid rock I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. All other ground, yeah, is sinking sand. Ooh, yeah. When he shall come with trumpet sound, oh, may I then in him be found, standing in his righteousness alone, farthest standing before his throne. Ooh, Christ the solid rock I stand. All of the ground is sinking sand. All of the ground, yeah, is sinking sand. Ooh, on Christ the solid rock I stand. All of the
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Joy in My House. Inspirational reality radio show with a touch of recovery. A reality radio show where nothing is left unsaid
And nothing insignificant.
and no one is insignificant.
Who says it?
Who says it?
There you go.
That's our producer, Van Eric, and my guest co-host today. We're in the studio with Crystal Olson. She is the founder of Classy Lady Ministry. And I wanted to touch on that. God wouldn't leave you at this time of turmoil. You came out to California. You trusted in this man. And again, when we trust in man, we're going to be let down. It's trusting in God
Right.
that counts. That's the one we got to trust in. And hopefully, the more submission we have, the more guidance he gives us and the more direction. And this was an opportunity for you to find out God's power, because
Yeah.
he didn't leave you at this time.
He's never left me. And that, you know what, last night I was thinking, I'm like, my own life is the greatest testimony and comfort and encouragement to me, because I look back at everything that I have gone through, and he always has taken care of me. He has brought me through like the scariest, most horrible things. I mean, there's stuff that I have not touched on in this interview for reasons. And honestly, for the past 7 years, I have gone under the most horrific attacks I've ever gone through in my whole life, and very, very, very scary. I'm actually currently I'm being stalked by somebody, and I have been for 7 years, and I have to deal with things relating to that. Very serious attacks. And when I look back at everything that relates to that, God has not let me fall. He has not let this person win and try to ruin me the way this person has. And so, yeah, I mean, it's...
Well, having had made these great connections and these great friends that were there for you, people of God, really helped you have some faith and some structure in what you were doing, because then you decided to get your life straight, and you have, and you decided to start a ministry called the Classy Lady Ministry.
And it's so funny because I never, ever, ever thought that I would be in women's ministry. That is not something I wanted to do, never thought I would do. I honestly always believed that I would be working with troubled teens. That is where, and it's just funny because I had people say things to me like, well, when you're working with these women in the future, and I'm thinking in my head, what are you talking about? I'm not going to be working with women. I'm going to be working with kids. And that is exactly what happened. I launched this ministry about 3 months ago. And, you know, since we got into our house in February, like you said, God has just placed the most phenomenal brothers and sisters in my life since then that have held me up. They've encouraged me, uplifted me. They have been I didn't have that up in Washington. Up in Washington, my whole life, I did not have really anybody. It was me and my kids, and I didn't have a life. My life was my kids. But since I've been here in California, for the first time, I have a life. And for the first time in my life, I am truly happy. For the first time.
Amen.
And so much has been, like, I mean, I started, editing for the magazine, which I absolutely love.
Tell us how that came about. How did you become
actually,
chief
I
editor?
had gone to a concert. There's a Christian rapper named Seven. I had gone to his concert, and on Facebook, I was on Facebook, and there was this magazine called Street Gospel Magazine. And so we would all I noticed that there's kind of like these circles down here in California. Everybody kind of seems to know each other, in ministry.
Right.
And so people were like, hey, Crystal, come to our table, come say hi, at the concert, because they had their table set up. And so the founder of that magazine, that was, one of the people, he's like, hey, Crystal, come stop and say hi. So I did, and I went and got my copy of the magazine, not knowing that he would be such a huge part of my life, but we have become such great friends, and I have the utmost respect for him because he is the only man I have ever met, and I know he's going to be embarrassed by me saying this, but he's the only man that I've ever met that never, ever, ever tried to get with me. He's never even hinted at being attracted to me. We truly built a solid friendship, and only a friendship without all the extra stuff that you get from men, like, them calling you beautiful or whatever. Like, he never even hinted at ever being, and we've been friends for 6 months or so.
Well,
but
Miss Crystal, is this person you're talking to, is he in the house today?
Yeah, he is in the house, Mr. Leon Ridgway.
Okay.
Street Gospel Magazine. He came to support me today, so.
Oh, there you go. This is reality radio for your listening pleasure. So we're not going to let him get away if he's in the house.
That's right. We got to give props where props are due. When they're good men of God, we need to definitely promote them.
And it's the most real friendship I've ever had. Like, it really truly is, because there wasn't that distraction of somebody feeling like somebody wanted more from you.
Right.
He truly just,
and which is now what you're giving back through your ministry. You're teaching these women how to be these women of God.
Right.
What motivated you to start this ministry? Because we are running a little bit out of time, but I wanted to ask, what motivated you to start this ministry?
My motivation was, since moving down here, I have noticed that a lot of the Christian women are dressing very, very provocatively in mini dresses, mini skirts, full body cat suits, cleavage spilling out, and they're walking around. And I've had so many male friends tell me it is distracting. And my ministry really focuses on promoting modesty, and lust is a huge issue in the world, and it's, more than just the way women dress. It's, lust leads to adultery, fornication, broken marriages, broken families.
That's right.
And when we have women of God and men of God who are taking part in these sexual behaviors that they shouldn't and not being good representations of Christ, we've got a problem, because we've got blind sheep trying to lead blind sheep.
Right.
We can't have that. We need better examples. We really, really, really do.
Well, I want you guys to go out there and support her ministry. The website is www.theclassyladyministry.org. You can also find them on Facebook on their Facebook fan page / The Classy Lady Ministry. They also have a Twitter account. I want you to tweet them with your questions or comments regarding the ministry on twitter.com / The Classy Lady. Actually, The Classy_Lady on Twitter. The show is coming to a close, Crystal, but we always like to ask. The name of the show is called Joy in My House, the joy that we have in the midst of our challenges or in the midst of our praise, in the midst of our victories. What does joy in my house mean to you in today's day and age?
Hope. Because the guests who come on this show, by them sharing, us sharing our testimonies and the struggles that we've gone through, the obstacles and everything, it signifies hope, because it lets people know, like, hey, He didn't leave you. He's always with you, and He will help you through any situation. You just need to submit to Him. And that's me being hard-headed my whole life. That was something I never did, but thank God I finally have, and I've fully submitted to God. And now, like I said, everything's going great in my life. I'm happy because I'm living, in God's will and going down the path He has laid out for me, rather than the path I've tried to lay out and follow myself, which has always gotten me in trouble.
Amen. Crystal, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Joy in My House. I want you to catch us live here on WWW LA Talk live at noon. Next week, we have Faye Griffin, author of Morning Manna, Wisdom Served with Humor and Heart. You're not going to want to miss. This is Joy in My House, ladies and gentlemen. Have a blessed day.
Missile attacks are awaiting. There's been so many changes. Whoa, enough to blow your mind. Oh, my life needs rearranging. Been building on the same